I now call to order the Committee on House Administration for the purpose of starting today's hearing on the operations and priorities of the House officers and legislative branch entities. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. I would like to start off by thanking my colleagues and our witnesses for your attendance today. I know how busy everyone is, and we appreciate your flexibility and willingness to appear this afternoon. I would also like to thank our witnesses for their hard work and assistance during our new member orientation, for their help in creating a very smooth transition for members and their staff into the 115th Congress, and especially for the incredible amount of work that went into securing and hosting the presidential inauguration. We know many months of preparation went into ensuring our government carried out the sacred, peaceful transition of power from one administration to another. 2017 marks the Committee on House Administration's 70th year of existence. We are holding this hearing earlier than usual because I felt it was prudent that we as a committee have an opportunity to hear from each of you as we start this Congress. We share a common goal of serving both the public and our members and staff. I believe that this committee and your agencies will only be successful in accomplishing that goal if we work together. We want to know your priorities, needs, and expectations for 2017 and 2018. We also want to hear from you about any issues that are pending or may come up this Congress. I look at this hearing as a way to put it all out on the table so we can speak and have this discussion. Each of you plays a unique and critical role in serving the public as well as members and staff. For example, the architect of the Capitol maintains the buildings and grounds across the Capitol complex and Supreme Court so that we conduct business on behalf of the American people. The Library of Congress is the collector and protector of the world's largest assemblage of catalog books, photographs, films, maps, sheet music, and more things than we can mention. The Government Publishing Office is responsible for the collection, production, distribution, and preservation of public information for all three branches of government. The United States Capitol Police is charged with keeping our nation's democracy safe. And we must meet the demands of today. That includes, among other things, protecting against ever-evolving technologies. Like many organizations, you have to protect your infrastructures from those that wish us harm. Your agencies are also forced to meet their missions in a very difficult budget environment. This is when priorities become essential, as well as using the resources allocated by Congress wisely. Again, I look forward to hearing from you today, working with you in the future, and I thank you for your appearance before our committee today. I would now like to recognize my colleague and ranking member, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. I'd first like to introduce our newest member of our committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland. Congressman Raskin has big shoes to fill, succeeding my friend Chris Van Hollen, who moved over to the House of Lords down the hall, otherwise known as the United States Senate. Jamie will be a great asset to this committee. During his decade in the Maryland Senate, he was leader on campaign finance and election reform issues. And to our witnesses today, a word of caution, Jamie is a local member, so he represents many of your employees, so I expect him to be paying very close attention to how your agencies run. So welcome, Congressman Raskin. I like to be brief because I want to hear from our agencies, but I have 4 quick comments. Chief, your team did an excellent job with the inauguration, the Women's March, and all the activities surrounding the start of the new Congress. Sean Gallagher did a great job on Inauguration Day, so I want to make sure you knew we were paying attention. Also, I want to personally thank you for coming into my city, the city of Philadelphia, making me proud. Your officers did an excellent job under tough circumstances, hot as could be with their vesting at the checkpoints, and they really did a professional job and made everybody, made me proud of the job that you do, and let everybody know that you do the same exact job in D.C., so I want to thank you for that. To the librarian, I look forward to having you in Philadelphia soon. I understand you're coming to see me, and I wanted to acknowledge that I thought David Mao did an excellent job as acting librarian, and I'm sad to see him go, and I know we will have your work cut out for you, but you can handle it, I'm sure. Stephen, your team did a great job on all the moves. Bill Wiedemeyer always does a solid job. As someone who was a new suite in the Rayburn office, because you kicked me out of the Canyon, but that's okay. I like the Rayburn better now. I'm continually impressed with your organization, and you did a great job for all of us. And I know it was a tough time because members being moved and don't have to move because of the remodeling of the cannon, but it fit in well, and I thank you for that. Thank you for my office. They're doing a great job with that, too. Davita, thank you always being available to me and my team in helping us work through some issues from time to time. I want you to know that I very much appreciate how difficult your job can be. So that's all to say, Mr. Chairman. We're lucky to have these witnesses working for us, and I look forward to hearing from them.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. And I'd also like to introduce our new members to this committee, not new to Congress, but new to the committee, Barry Loudermilk and Adrian Smith. Welcome. We're glad to have you here. And I'm glad you mentioned David Mao, who we will miss. I can't believe he's having to work late on his last day at the Library of Congress, but you're very much appreciated for all your hard work, Dr. Mao, and we wish you the very best in the future. Does any other member wish to be recognized for the purpose of an opening statement? As a housekeeping matter, the hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members may submit any supplemental materials they wish to include. I'd now like to introduce our witnesses for today. First, Stephen Ayers was appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate to serve as the architect of the Capitol in 2010, making him the 11th architect of the Capitol. Mr. Ayers is responsible for the entire Capitol complex facility, management, operations, and including reasonable and responsible renovation and sustainability programs. He is also responsible for all the works of art in the Capitol, maintaining and restoration of the murals, outdoor sculptures, and other architecture elements throughout. And we welcome you, Mr. Ayers. Dr. Carla Hayden was sworn in as the 14th Librarian of Congress on September the 14th, 2016. Her appointment to this position also marked the very first time in our nation's library that we have had it led by a woman and an African American. She is a librarian's librarian, dedicating her entire career to pursuing the accessibility of libraries in communities. In her short time leading the library, Dr. Hayden has already demonstrated her commitment to continuing the tradition of collecting, preserving, and making available a vast collection of educational resources and protecting these collections for future generations. The committee welcomes you, Dr. Hayden. Davita Vance-Cooks became the 27th individual to direct the U.S. Government Publishing Office in 2013. Ms. Vance-Cooks is the first woman and first African American to lead the agency and has served in a variety of management roles at GPO since 2004, I believe. As director, Ms. Vance-Cooks has guided the agency towards cutting costs while at the same time modernizing GPO to improve services. Specifically, GPO has focused on expanding the electronic availability of government information via public apps, bulk data downloads, and of course, e-books. Welcome back, Ms. Vance-Cooks. On March 21st, 2016, Matthew R. Verderosa was sworn in as the Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police. Chief Verderosa is the 9th Chief and has served in numerous roles with the U.S. Capitol Police since, I believe, 1986, including positions in the Uniformed and Patrol Division, the Internal Affairs Division, and the Training Services Bureau. As Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police, Chief Verderosa is responsible for commanding a force of sworn and civilian personnel who are dedicated to providing comprehensive law enforcement, security, and protective operations services to the U.S. Congress, members, staff, millions of annual visitors, and the surrounding complex. Welcome back, Chief Verderosa. Again, we thank each of you for joining us today. The committee has received your written testimony. At the appropriate time, I'll recognize you for 5 minutes to present a summary of that information. Of course, you know how the light system works. When it goes yellow, you have 1 minute, and then red means bring it in for a landing at some point. The chair now recognizes the architect of the Capitol, Stephen Ayers, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Harper and Ranking Member Brady and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today to provide an overview of the architect of the Capitol's operations, achievements, and goals. In 1793, George Washington laid the cornerstone of the United States Capitol, and construction began on Dr. William Thornton's winning design. Dr. Thornton is known as the first architect of the Capitol, and today, nearly 225 years later, our Capitol campus has grown to more than 17.4 million square feet of space, spanning 36 facilities and 570 acres of grounds. Today, the campus is home to more than 30,000 daily occupants and millions of visitors throughout the world and the United States. In fiscal year 2016, we inspired more than 2.2 million visitors to the Capitol Visitor Center to explore the roots of our country's government through stories and hands-on activities. In addition, 1.2 million visitors to the United States Botanic Garden were informed about the importance, often irreplaceable value of plants to the well-being of our society. Our mission to serve the Congress and the Supreme Court, preserve America's capital, and inspire memorable experiences recognizes the trust placed in us as the builder and steward of our country's most iconic landmarks. The 2,100 talented and dedicated men and women of the AOC proudly work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year to balance the responsibility of preserving historic buildings while meeting the demands of a modern workforce. Viewed from a distance, our buildings are inspiring and impressive, but up close they're distressed, as weather and age and deferred maintenance have destroyed their stone exteriors. The integrity of our buildings is threatened by water infiltration, which can have disastrous consequences. The Congress continues to make good investments in stone preservation, our top priority, to reduce the risk, for which we are extremely grateful. We've been able to make good progress to improve our infrastructure and recently completed several major projects across the campus, including the first restoration of the United States Capitol, Dome, and Rotunda in more than 50 years, the initial phase of the Cannon House Office Building renewal, and the United States Capitol Stone Preservation Project, the successful conservation of the Ulysses S. Grant Memorial, just to name a few. The eyes of the nation and the world are upon us each and every day, and we're honored to support so many high-profile events, including the 58th presidential inauguration, where our team of professionals completed all of the necessary construction well ahead of schedule. We're pleased to play an important role in welcoming each new Congress. This year, our teams managed moves for 199 House members in just 24 working days with not a single injury, and we are very proud of that. Our project prioritization process allows us to maximize each and every taxpayer dollar as we go about executing these essential projects. Yet, risk remains, and we look forward to continuing to work with the Congress to address the growing backlog of preventive maintenance projects, today estimated at more than $1.5 billion. Improving the energy efficiency of our campus is also a central concern, and over the last 10 years, we've achieved a 30.9% reduction in energy usage. Further reducing energy consumption remains an agency priority, and we've established a new 10-year goal of achieving an additional 20% reduction in energy consumption by the end of 2025. We strive to be a world-class organization providing superior service to our clients, and we appreciate this committee and the congressional community for your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. The chair now recognizes the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, for 5 minutes. Dr. Hayden.
Thank you, Chairman Harper. for the first time. Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, members of the committee. I'd like to start by thanking each of you that I've had an honor to meet for your warm welcome, your offers of support, and the commitment that you've expressed for the library since I've been in the position. You and your predecessors in this body built the library, and it remains one of the greatest gifts and legacies that Congress has given to the American people. I'd also like to recognize Deputy Librarian Dr. David Mao. As you know, David served as the acting librarian of Congress for an entire year, and during that time, he led many efforts to improve library management and operations. David has accepted a leadership position at the Georgetown University and will be leaving the library later this month. So I wanted to personally thank him for his service and thank him for making my transition so much easier. I was asked recently what my favorite thing is about being the Librarian of Congress. And what it is that every day I have the opportunity to discover something new, from letters written by Rosa Parks to photographs of early inaugurations through history to a letter that Albert Einstein wrote to Sigmund Freud. These treasures are rivaled only by the staff. During my first months at the library, I conducted a listening tour, meeting with staff and learning about our operations. It has been the highlight of my first 4 months to meet these incredibly dedicated and skilled public servants. I've assembled my senior leadership team and established our communications channels so we can work effectively and efficiently for the institution. I have met with many members of Congress to learn more about your perspective on the library, and I've also met with dozens of groups and individuals in the creative community and other users of the Copyright Office. And finally, I've taken some initial steps toward increasing the library's accessibility both on-site and online. We've opened the Librarian Ceremonial Office and expanded the hours of our Young Reader Center. We've launched a new homepage that is more dynamic, and as many of you know, I am now tweeting, allowing me to interact directly with library users around the globe. It has been a stimulating and energizing 4 months, and it is just the beginning of, I hope, a very exciting, dynamic time. The library has undertaken a visioning effort that involves analyzing trends at other information-based organizations. I've been working with our new strategic planning officer to strengthen how we plan, develop goals, and track our progress. We are also formulating a library-wide digital strategy. Of course, a digital strategy hinges on good IT, information technology fundamentals. As this committee is very much aware, the library has had some challenges in the area of information technology, but I'm pleased to report that important progress is being made. Among the recommendations the library received was to hire a chief information officer. In September of 2015, Bernard Barton Budd began as CIO. He joins me today. Under his leadership, we have made steady progress in implementing recommendations made by the GAO and the library's Inspector General to improve information technology services, most importantly in the areas of better defined investment planning, cybersecurity, and centralization. I appreciate all that Mr. Barton and his staff have done, and I look forward to reporting in the future, not just on improvements, but also on IT innovations at the Library of Congress. Another critical priority is collection stewardship. The library opened an interim storage facility this year, and high on my priority list is also the modernization of the Copyright Office. As always, service to Congress is the core mission of the library, and the Congressional Research Service and Law Library stand ready to serve you. Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. The chair now recognizes the Government Publishing Office Director, Davita Vance-Cooks, for 5 minutes.
Good evening. Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the Committee on House Administration, thank you for inviting me to address priorities for FY18 and beyond. I am pleased to state that today the GPO is in a good place. We are a digital publishing operation with a diversified product and services portfolio, and we have won multiple digital innovation awards. We have a wonderfully engaged workforce committed to the mission of keeping America informed, and it is because of them that we have achieved so much. In the results of the FY16 Employee Viewpoint Survey, GPO's engagement score was 9.3 points higher than the government-wide score. Our finances for FY16, as confirmed by our KPMG annual audit, were the strongest they've ever been in the past 5 years. Our congressional appropriation requests over the past 5 years have been relatively flat. We have successfully halted the growth of our overhead spending cost, and our budgeted staffing level of 1,750 employees is the lowest this century. Our productivity exponentially increased because we embraced digital equipment, digital products, and digital processes. For example, Mr. Chairman, with your approval as the chairman of the JCP, we put into operation a zero make-ready press called the ZMR. It allowed us to A, phase out 3 outdated presses installed back in 1979, and B, it allowed us to cut the page rate for publishing congressional hearings, the first such rate reduction in memory. Our digital repository database called FDSys and its newly introduced successor in beta called GovInfo supports openness and transparency. This database now holds more than 1.6 million titles in the federal government information, and we now have retrievals of nearly 40 million documents per month. As we look into the future, we will continue to focus on modernizing our operations and providing value to our stakeholders. And I want you to know that we are strategically positioned to meet the demands of 2018. First, we will continue to implement strategies to improve our employee engagement because our employees are the best assets we have. Second, we will implement the first phase of our new digital composition system that composes bills in XML. It will also include a feature for modernizing the publishing of hearings as requested by this committee. Third, we will develop a new cost accounting system to simplify the rate-making process and provide visibility and transparency to our costs and billing. Fourth, we will continue to strengthen our partnership with a network of 1,148 federal depository libraries across the nation by collaborating on projects which will improve program flexibility. By the way, there are 34 federal depository libraries in the districts represented by the members of this committee. Fifth, we will continue to strengthen our partnership with the private sector printing industry by automating our print procurement program. This program produces 3/4 of all the orders we handle, provides highly competitive prices, and supports tens of thousands of jobs nationwide, primarily in the small business sector. In FY16, the dollar value of the awards for the states represented by the members of this committee was $197 million. Sixth, we will release GovInfo from beta, and we intend to earn designation as the first federal agency to meet the international standards of a trusted digital repository. And lastly, after 5 years of collaboration and cooperation with the Department of State, we are ready to launch the U.S. government passport, the next gen. Now, as you can imagine, cybersecurity is a challenge, and we're a member of the Committee on Cybersecurity to look into it. Thank you for approving the $2 million to address that issue. And in closing, where legislative changes are concerned, I respectfully ask for a change in the JCP rule that requires the GPO to request approval before making an expenditure over $50,000 or an interagency agreement over $20,000. These thresholds were set over 30 years ago, long before we had financial controls and an IG and annual audits. The other legislative branch agencies don't have this requirement, and I'm asking for parity. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee, this concludes my opening remarks. On the money.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. The chair now recognizes the Chief of the Capitol Police, Matthew Verderosa. Chief.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the United States Capitol Police and our mission to protect Congress. It's my honor to serve as Chief of Police, and I'm honored to be here with you today. I'm joined here today by my executive team and my executive management team, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Richard Braddock, my General Counsel, Gretchen DeMar, and our new Chief of Operations, Assistant Chief Steve Sun. Steve Sun comes to us from the Metropolitan Police after serving 25 years, bringing significant senior command and operational experience to the department. Also joining me today is the department's Inspector General, Faye Rapella, as well as the USCP Fraternal Order Police Chairman, Gus Papathanasio. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to begin today by thanking the committee for its steadfast support of the United States Capitol Police and its mission. The regular discussions that we've had with you and your staff are greatly appreciated, as they allow us the opportunity to provide the committee with important updates about our activities, challenges, and areas of focus. In addition, I'm grateful for the committee's engagement and feedback so the department may continue to effectively meet the needs of the House of Representatives and that of Congress. Additionally, I'd like to thank the United States Capitol Police Board for its guidance and support as we carry out our complex security and law enforcement operations. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the women and men of the United States Capitol Police. On a daily basis, they publicly demonstrate how the American freedoms that we hold dear are carried out in our nation's capital. They work tirelessly to ensure that the Congress is able to conduct its legislative responsibilities without disruption, all the while exhibiting the utmost respect for the Constitution and the protection of First Amendment liberties. I'm thoroughly impressed with the performance and their commitment and to constantly rise to the occasion and to handle whatever comes our way. Last May, I had the pleasure of appearing before the committee to provide an overview of the department's management plan for fiscal year 2017 and beyond. As I stated then, it is the responsibility of the USCP to do everything possible to protect and safeguard members, staff, and visitors each day in an open and complex environment, as the threats and risks we face today are increasingly sophisticated and dynamic. In coordination with the Capitol Police Board and oversight committees, the USCP has developed a multi-year strategy that provided for growth of the department to fulfill three critical new mission sets: enhancement of the House garage security, the addition of pre-screeners and overwatch personnel at various building access points, and the continued use of enhanced portal scanners. I'm pleased to report that after reallocating internal resources to begin to address these emerging priorities, the department has deployed the House Garage Security Screening Initiative for approximately 60% of the House buildings. By working in concert with the architect of the Capitol, Rayburn Garage Renovation Project, the department is expected to complete the final stage of this initiative when specific security milestones are accomplished with the Rayburn Garage redesign and build-out in fiscal years 2018 through 19. However, staffing of security posts is dependent, obviously, upon additional resources. Additionally, the department has begun to increase its capacity for pre-screeners and overwatch personnel at various office building access points by leveraging our new canine teams and subject interdiction officer capabilities. This initiative will become more visible to the congressional community in the coming months. And to complete the list, the department has had great success in utilizing the enhanced portal screeners on visitors wishing to enter the House chamber during major events, such as the State of the Union and joint meetings of Congress. While additional resources are necessary in the out years to complete these initiatives and to provide the necessary stationary posts, I remain confident in the department's ability to meet these new mission sets within the next several years and continued support of the Capitol Police Board and Congress. I do want to note that the new responsibility assigned to the Department of Protecting and Securing the O'Neill House Office Building, which will take effect later this spring, will likely impact the overall schedule to complete these other efforts. This new responsibility requires significant resources and was not anticipated at the time the department established the three primary security initiatives in 2016. With this in mind, we've been working closely with the Capitol Police Board, the House Sergeant-at-Arms and Oversight Committees, and our Chief of Operations and CAO to help develop a plan to ensure this mission is successfully enacted, as well as receives the necessary resources for implementation. Once the department has had the opportunity to benchmark and analyze the relevant data and trends following the addition of the new House office building to our critical security infrastructure, we'll continue to look for efficiencies and examine the potential for reapportioning personnel as appropriate. I look forward to discussing many of these new initiatives with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you should have.
Thank you very much, Chief Verderosa. Committee members will now ask questions of the witnesses. Each member is allotted 5 minutes to question the witnesses. To help each member track the times, we'll use the same timing devices, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Hayden, if I can start with you, I want to again thank you for taking the time to meet with us this afternoon. And I'm always amazed by the library's statistics. 164 million items in all formats and languages, 1.8 million on-site visitors, and 93 million visits to your website. I mean, the numbers go on, and they're very impressive. Your testimony describes a number of initiatives that the library will be focused on during the remainder of this fiscal year and into 2018. What do you anticipate as your challenges as you meet those goals?
In meeting the increasing demand for the library's resources, the challenge that I share with some of my colleagues here, in fact, have quite a bit to do with the technological capacity as well as the modernization of many of our operations. I mentioned that Mr. Barton has joined us and quite a bit of progress has been made, and so that will be a continuing need, as well as storage capacity for those collections will remain something that the library has a major responsibility for, these unique collections and items that make up quite a bit of that 162 million items. The other challenge is to concentrate on making sure that the library is run efficiently and effectively, centralizing a number of operations, particularly information technology, and also and this challenge is actually an opportunity to make more people aware throughout the nation, in particular, of the resources that are available already and digitized for use in K through 12 classrooms, teacher education, outreach, and letting people know about what the library already has. We've been called one of the best kept secrets, and we don't want to be secret anymore.
Well, I can assure you, you're known by the members and our staffs. And coming off what was a very successful new member retreat in January, how will CRS continue to support our new members and their staff and other members, of course, that have been here? And if you could just talk for a moment about how you are planning on improving the CRS to better assist members and staff.
The Congressional Research Service, I've often called it the special forces of the library. Their primary mission is to serve Congress and its staff with the best analysis on policies and topics up to date. The strengthening of the subject specialists in Congressional Research Service operations is key, and we are working to make sure there is successful recruitment and retention of those subject specialists, as well as making sure that the Congressional Research Service has the information technology capacity to serve Congress and staff in the latest ways.
Great. You know, you've talked a lot already about information technologies and what you're doing to invest in that. And so as we look at that, of course, I've got one example here in my hand. The library is partnering with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing to help provide U.S. currency readers to sight-impaired individuals to help identify their currency. Unbelievable. Are there other initiatives that perhaps you could highlight today?
And thank you for demonstrating a wonderful device that is allowing people who are visually challenged to operate seamlessly in the world. And the National Library Services for the Blind and Physically Handicapped is an important, smaller part of the library, but so important. The Library Services for the Blind operation is looking at even more capacity in handheld devices that will allow Braille on demand. And so right from a email, the Braille will be touchable and instantaneous. So instead of working and waiting for the translation, it will be instantaneous. So that's just an example of what technology can allow the library to do for all citizens.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hayden. My time is expired. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Mr. Brady for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have 2 quick questions I'd like to ask all 4 panelists, if you each respond briefly. You know, information is power, and our computer systems and networks are under attack every day. I've had briefings from the CAO and the Sergeant at Arms. So before you submit your budget request, I'd like to know what you need to protect your information systems, and do you have all the money and people that you need to protect them while you're protecting us? Unrelated but equally as important, I'd like to get a snapshot of your relationship with your respective unions. I hear from them if things are not going well, and it's been relatively quiet. I'm a little worried about that, but recently. But I wanted to know from each of you that you're committed to a good relationship with your organization and workforce. Mr. Ayers, yours very little, but I know you got a great relationship. Dr. Hayden, we've talked in the past, and with your predecessor, we've did a lot of work there with a lot of your security people there, and we work well with them. Director Cook, you have about 18 of them, I think, because every one of them is in my office every day. Just about, but they seem to be happy, so I hope that you're working well with them. And Chief, I know we have a new, have a new Gus Papa back there, a new minted chairman, you call him. I call him president of the union, and I probably shouldn't say this, but he says some nice things about you. So I think that, but that's not a real big deal because your predecessor, nobody said nice things about, including me. But you're doing an excellent job there, and the proof of it, you have all your job security people here behind you all. So I guess you have a good, I hope that you continue to have a good relationship. So real briefly, just if you can respond, all 4 years briefly. Thank you.
Well, I'll start because I'm the newest, and I've been able to have several meetings and establish regular meetings with the library's 3 unions, and they've been very productive because we are working on things that will allow us all to work together and be proactive. And there have been some exciting things coming. I was even invited to the holiday party, so I think that's a good start in terms of that. But we are working very much together on that. And with cybersecurity, the library is participating in the legislative branch cybersecurity working group and has a FY17 request in for strengthening our cybersecurity capacity.
Okay, lady next. Okay, great. 2 things. In terms of cybersecurity, we recently had approval of $2 million to address that issue, and we're using it to address it in terms of enhancement programs as well as implementation. To give you an example for an enhancement, we're going to truly try to strengthen our firewall configuration and our router configuration and our DDoS configuration as well. And then in terms of implementing new things, we're looking at the inside threat capacity as opposed to just the outside threat, because it does matter. You can get it from both the outside as well as internal. In terms of the unions, we have 13 unions. Okay. And the good news story is that our unions and our management work well together because we want the same thing. We want the GPO to be a good place to work. And I'm proud to say that just last week we signed another wage negotiation. We're in the middle of wage negotiations for a 5-year period. We work well together. I would characterize it as productive.
Thank you, sir, for the questions. In terms of cybersecurity, my CIO and our CISO have direct access to me and the executive team. We participate actively in the Ledge Branch organization. We also are going to focus in this fiscal year on vulnerability and risk threat management, training, threat assessment, and sharing with our partners, not only in the Ledge Branch, but with other federal partners. I think we have a great plan. I think we're going to leverage some cross-servicing within economies of scale within the Ledge Branch. And in terms of the unions, I have 2 unions, the Teamsters and the FOP. I think throughout the course of my career, I've always had a good working relationship with both unions. Officer Papathanassiou and I go back a long time in terms of working the House Division together, and I think we both we see opportunities rather than impediments, and I think we work wherever we can to come to common ground and fix the issues. And frankly, I value the working relationship because at the end of the day, we're both in this for the same thing, to get, to have the best treatment for our employees and to get the most effectiveness and efficiency from the workforce. And I think we both are aligned very closely on that goal. And I have a great working relationship with Karen Gray Thomas, who is our spokesperson for the Teamsters. And frankly, we have a great workforce, and I continue to look forward to working with both unions.
And thank you, Mr. Brady. We too have a strong IT system in place that's backed up at the alternative computer facility, and we use an active system. And throughout the day, our network may be run out of a building here on campus or a building there, and no one knows the difference. It's quite amazing to me. From a cybersecurity perspective, we have done multiple penetration tests. We've had the House IG review our system. We're implementing the National Security Agency's top 10 mitigation strategies. We're pretty comfortable with where we are on that. And like Ms. Vance-Cooks, we too have multiple unions that care for our employees, and we have collective bargaining agreements in place with them. I meet and my deputy meet quarterly with all of our unions. Our unions are staffed with really top-notch officers, and we have a great working relationship, open, honest, and transparent, and respectful discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Ayers, for Bill Wiedemeyer. You got a gem there.
I'm going to regret that, Mr. Brady.
Absolute professional. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Chair now recognizes the Vice Chairman for the committee, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Verderosa, I know you mentioned in your testimony about the new security protocols and screening in and around the House office buildings and the garages. I'd like your, a little more, if you could go into a little more of what that has meant to our ensuring that there's a secure perimeter around our Capitol buildings and in the garages. And I want to know if, are there some standard security protocols that you guys follow at the Capitol Police at these screening checkpoints? And also, are we achieving consistency throughout the Capitol complex and vehicle entry points with this screening process that you guys have extended?
Certainly, I'll answer the second part first, if I may. We strive for consistency in everything that we do. I want the staff and the members to know what to expect when they enter into the buildings. And we have been training. We actually, several years ago, revamped our entire security screening process to a unified approach. So the way you get screened in the House buildings is the same as you get screened at the Senate office buildings as well. That entails looking at best practices in the industry. We partnered with TSA, the Marshal Service, and we looked at what we had already been doing to develop our protocols. And we've standardized this process. It's a quite lengthy, we have a 40-some-odd page directive that deals with virtually every scenario that you could have in screening. So obviously it's closely held, but we look at the division level supervisors going out and ensuring that they provide the feedback necessary for the officers in the field. We also bring our officers in for periodic retraining and recertification and security screening. It's the same with the automobile checks. Though the closer you get to the Capitol, the more stringent the checks become. We want to keep the threat as far away as we can.
Well, speaking of that, Chief, what does your current security posture look like within the Capitol Police?
We are always operating at a very high level. So when we have major events around the world, obviously we are closely connected in the intelligence side on the high side, and we're also working with our partners at various other institutions to determine what, in fact, the known intelligence is, what are the best practices that they are seeing, and we leverage all that information and provide that information through lookouts, BOLOs, intelligence bulletins, and other various means of communication to all of our employees. When we see events around the world, obviously we're looking for copycat and other types of information that may lead us to believe that a threat may be imminent, warranted, to take additional information. That's particularly when you see a show of force, a more intensive show of force. But we're always operating at a very high level. We have assets in and around the perimeter, both physical security assets, operational assets in terms of personnel that are assigned to various access points. Some are seen and some are not seen. We are employing an additional, as one of the initiatives with the board, the Capitol Police Board, we're employing additional assets outside of access points. For the next several years, we'll be building up our team to provide eyes-on outside doors as opposed to having the fight at the door. We're going to try to keep the battle outside the buildings.
And that's here and around the Capitol.
That's correct.
Can you give an assessment of how is your team working with increased threat levels, maybe out in the rest of the country in members' district offices? How do you coordinate any activity that could be viewed as a threat that you hear about? How do you coordinate your activities with local law enforcement?
Well,
Protect the district office.
That's a great question, and we have a very active Protective Services Bureau. I have approximately 35, 40 investigators that look at intelligence and threat assessment. And what they do is they have outreach through the Sergeant at Arms office for not only planned events, but we are also monitoring active social media. We're monitoring all sources of both classified and unclassified information to determine whether or not a member of Congress or a senator is a target of demonstration activity, is a target of a nefarious effort, a criminal act. And we also provide, on the positive side, we provide, we go out and actively do security awareness briefings. We coordinate threat assessment briefings for not only staff here on the Hill, but district offices as well.
Well, thank you, Chief. My time's up, but I do want to come tour that shooting range still, too.
Absolutely. We're ready. We're ready. We've been operating for about 6 months.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And now, Chair will now recognize Ms. Lofgren for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad to be getting an early start on oversight this year. I think it's a good thing, and it seems that some of the issues in past years have been resolved in many cases, so that's very encouraging, and we'll continue to work with these wonderful leaders as the year goes on. Dr. Hayden, it's a thrill to see you here, the new Librarian of Congress. You were introduced as the first female Librarian of Congress, first African American, but I think you're the first Librarian of Congress. Maybe not, but it's been a long time.
In 50-something years.
Yes, it's been a long time, and it's great to have
Thank you.
a librarian's librarian there. You, in your testimony, identified the need for IT upgrades, and I'm so appreciative that that is a focus that you have. And the staff works very hard. At least the staff I've met over there love the library. They're dedicated to it, but the technology is antiquated. In particular, I'm interested in the Copyright Office, which has antiquated. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of upgrading that technology. Do you feel you have the resources at this point necessary to do those upgrades, or do you have a strategy to get to where we think we need to be there?
There is definitely a strategy, and I want to emphasize the helpfulness of the GAO reports and the Inspector General recommendations that provide the roadmap and help with our strategy and overall IT strategy. The Copyright Office has a number of unique IT needs that can be supported, and Mr. Barton, who's here with me today, the CIO for the library, has been able to really coordinate the library strengthening infrastructure, technology infrastructure, with the special needs of not only the Copyright Office, but CRS, for instance, that has specialized needs. And so the support, and there are FY17 and will be 18 requests to make sure that the modernization, IT modernization for the Copyright Office continues, particularly in the areas of registration, copyright registration, and a searchable copyright database of the records. That's a major focus. There are 32 million copyright records. This is getting a little in the weeds with like a card catalog that have been digitized, but they're not searchable. And so the main focus will be making sure that the library's IT infrastructure can support those special
That would be
needs.
a major advance in terms of
Yes.
protecting intellectual property. That would be
Yes.
very, and
For
that,
the
which is,
users
this
and-
office is key for that.
Yes, and I think people might not realize how vital the Copyright Office is to the creative input and output of the nation.
Speaking of that, I know you're in the process of hiring a new permanent registrar. Any timeline on that process?
The library asked for public comment on the aspects of the registers, not only qualifications and what might be needed in the next few years, but also the office itself. We received almost 5,000 public comment in a little over 5 weeks. And so we're reviewing those, and we'll be working to incorporate some of those comments and suggestions into the formal opening up of the position. So very shortly, you should be seeing something.
Very good. I see my time is almost up. Let me just close by talking to the chief. I think when we talked, I had a complaint that the screening on the Senate and the House side seemed discordant. It's greatly improved, and now I think it's consistent. So I want to thank you for attending to that. I know there are a lot, maybe things that are bigger on the screen, but it's nice to have consistency in both bodies, and I appreciate that very much.
Thank you for the
Mr.
feedback.
Chairman, I would yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. The chair will now recognize Mrs. Comstock for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to also thank Dr. Hayden for her interest in the online work with the library, and I know you, thank you for coming by with your staff and discussing that and our shared interest in how we can use technology to really make the library's vast collection more available, and just for the benefit of those who might be watching C-SPAN, but also could you maybe paint a better picture on how we can use this from the children's events that you have and the collections available there on up, and just maybe give a little bit more vivid picture of how the possibilities of how we can utilize that going forward.
And as a former children's librarian, I have to say my eyes light up when I think about the fact that we are now able to live stream programming from Washington, D.C. to anywhere in the world. And we just started that this past Saturday when we opened the Young Readers Center in the Jefferson Building on Saturdays. And we live streamed to 4 states and had direct responses from the young people in the audiences. They asked the author questions, and they were able to get responses, and the children in the Jefferson Building were able to wave and do all kinds of things with the others. So that was an experiment, and we're expanding that. We already have so much online for K through 12 educators teaching with primary sources. And one of my first experiences and I mentioned earlier that I've been amazed at all of the wonderful things that are available at the library. A scanner that's the size of a queen-size bed that can scan rare and old maps that could never be put on display or used, that are now able to be scanned and then downloaded and printed out and used by anyone. Also, traveling exhibits are coming and downloading all types of photographs. And my most recent experience was with the inauguration display that we had, where we had the inauguration route of Abraham Lincoln. And that only comes out maybe once every 5 years. We were able to duplicate that, and people could touch it and trace the route. So there's so many possibilities that technology makes possible to spread the Library of Congress throughout the world, but definitely throughout the nation.
Thank you. And as a daughter of a librarian, I too appreciate having a librarian in this position. Now, you said the program was shared with 4 states, and you're expecting to grow that? Are there, if people want to participate in
yes.
schools, they
Yes.
contact you?
Schools, community centers, rec centers, and it's particularly in rural areas that might not have the opportunity to have Newbery and Caldecott award-winning authors that are there. So we really are going to focus on rural areas and making that also connect to our traveling 18-wheeler that I'm working on now. That, yes, an 18-wheeler, library on the move, that will be on both coasts and in the middle, that can just pull up Bakersfield, anywhere, and you can interact with library materials and have dedicated staff that can explain things too. So it's an exciting time. Libraries are
Thank you.
being cool.
I really appreciate those efforts, and I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, and Chair's happy to recognize our new member to the committee and to Congress, Mr. Raskin, for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your very warm welcome, and thank you also to Mr. Brady for his warm welcome as the representative of the 8th Congressional District, which borders the District of Columbia, and a native to this area. It's quite an exceptional thrill and honor for me to be on this committee overseeing our extraordinary Capitol campus. I'm delighted to say I've been able to draw on the resources and the work of all of your various offices already in just about a month in office, and all of you I want to thank for being very responsive. Special hello to Dr. Hayden, who was in Maryland before she came to the Library of Congress, and my father-in-law, who was a librarian for a long time, got the chance to meet Dr. Hayden and described it as like meeting the Beatles. So I've got one very quick, pretty much a yes or no question for all of you, and then I've got a couple questions for Dr. Ayers. As a local representative, I've been hearing from a number of my young constituents who have been disappointed in the last several weeks that they had jobs they thought they were going to get in different parts of the federal government, but because of the hiring freeze are now closed out. And I just wanted to make sure that each of your offices is actually open for young people who are looking to be in the public service now. And I don't know if we could just go down the line. Perhaps, Chief, you could start.
Yes, we are hiring as needed based on our position availability.
Terrific.
We are very interested in hiring pathway interns, okay? And I noticed in the latest document on the hiring freeze that we can do that, and so you will see that.
Terrific.
Very similar, and also volunteer opportunities that will lead and position young people to be right there and have the experience when the positions are open. So we also have internships and fellowships.
Gotcha. What you mean when the hiring freeze is lifted, the positions?
When there's an available position, they already have experience and have worked in the library.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And we are continuing to recruit new employees, and also we have a summer intern program where we recruit about 100 or more summer interns to work for about 12 weeks for us. And that program is usually announced in the month of February as well, and we'll start them in May or June.
Terrific. Dr. Ayers, let me stay with you for a second if I could. And I'm so impressed by the work of your office, and all of us get to enjoy working in this awesome and most beautiful Capitol campus of any democracy or any nation on earth. It's really extraordinary. So I regret that I have to raise a matter with you that's an issue not of your own making, but I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you about this whole incident that's taken place with the removal of one of the paintings that a member of Congress brought forward as part of the Congressional Arts Competition. And I want to know whether, first, is it correct that this is unprecedented, that there's never been a removal of a piece of art from the Capitol campus on political grounds before?
That's my understanding as well.
Okay, and so, so my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, was that up until that removal, we basically had the American rule of free speech. If you look at a painting or a sculpture and you don't like it, you just go to the next one, and maybe you like that one more, you go to the next one, but you don't remove it or petition for its removal. Was that basically the rule up until this took place?
Well, again, I'm not familiar that a piece of artwork was ever moved. There's been public perceptions about pieces of artwork. I can recall a statue of George Washington by Greeno, more than 100 years ago, that was placed in different places in the Capitol building because of public's perception of President Washington. And ultimately, that sculpture was moved out of the Capitol and today is in the Smithsonian.
So, but are you now supposed to be regulating the potential political incorrectness or offensiveness of art because of this incident?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think this particular artwork competition that happens on an annual basis, there are a set of rules that it is my responsibility to enforce those rules. And so just that narrow focus, I think if you're talking a broader view of sculpture or artwork, yes, that really comes under the Joint Committee in the Library.
I see. Because my office people have raised with me questions of other works of art now as being offensive or politically incorrect in the wake of the removal of that piece of art. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raskin. And again, welcome. At this time, the committee will recognize Mark Walker for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our panel for being here today. A little bit late in the day, but appreciate your willingness to come out. I have a few questions, if I could direct them to the director of the GAO, Ms. Vance-Cooks, if that's okay, just for a few minutes. I was looking at your resume, and if this doesn't work out, it looks like your experience in the insurance industry. We might could use you around here these days, but it's quite impressive. It certainly is. I do have a few questions regarding certainly the printing office, if I could do so. As you know, we hear a lot about openness and transparency, and in both sides, really, as far as that being our goal, certainly striving to do so. Is there anything concrete or something that you would hope to do this upcoming year that would promote those transparency goals? Anything in the works, and would you be okay to speak to those?
Sure. Thank you for the question. In fact, there are several things that we're doing right now that I would like to highlight. The first has to do with digitization of content, especially historical content. This is critical for openness and transparency. As we sit here today, I am proud to report that we're collaborating with the Library of Congress, friend right here, to digitize the bound congressional record all the way back to 1873.
Wow.
And we're also working and collaborating with the OFR to digitize the Federal Register all the way back to its inception in 1936. So right away you can see that we have a lot of historical digitized content that's about to go out into the public. Secondly, with our GovInfo FDSys digital database, it's important to remind everyone that this is a huge repository database that we build every single day. Every time we publish a document, we feed it into the FDSys GovInfo database, and that's why it is growing exponentially. And as we sit, it has 1.6 million titles. Over 40 million of those documents are retrieved and downloaded every month across the world. So you can see that when we start to increase that database, we're also increasing openness and transparency. And then we also are doing a lot of work with XML bulk data. We actually are a member of the legislative branch bulk data task force, and we worked very diligently with the members to make some of this data available in XML, specifically the bill text, bill summary, and bill status information. The beauty of this is simple. when you have XML data available, the transparency advocates love it because they can take that data and they can repackage it, they can repurpose it and create a different product. That too allows us to go into openness and transparency. And last but not least is the fact that we're working diligently with a lot of libraries across the nation in our FDLP program to preserve some of the historical collections actually in tangible format. We have what we call preservation stewards, and we're working with them. We have 3 already. One is in Kentucky, and they have agreed to preserve, for example, all of the documents for the WPA. That's major. That's going to be wonderful when we can really spread it out across the United States.
All right.
So I hope that's
Sure.
helpful.
I promise we didn't rehearse this before. There was very good answers there.
Thank you.
And you really touched on the second one. My question is how often do you maybe review this process to make sure that you're doing the digital world? But maybe let me drive to this. Any work being done as far as projected cost savings by moving this from the paper world to the digital world? Have you looked into that at all?
We're starting to look, that's a great question too, because we're starting to look into it and trying to figure out how to monetize digitized content, and that's pretty difficult at this point. But what we can see is that when we no longer print the tangible copy, we're having great savings. And a good example, of course, is when we talked about the ZMR press, for example. When we actually installed that press and we started to realize that we were printing faster and having less waste, we realized that we could reduce the rate that we normally would charge, and we reduced the rate by 7%. So that's an example of how we can attempt to monetize.
Sure. Let
the
me
savings.
squeeze one more thing in here just for time purposes. If we're reducing cost savings, it may be sometimes size as well. I know there's a lot of people been scoping out the property over there.
Okay.
Is it possible that at some point that this would be a reduction in size as well? And that'll be my last question. I'll let you wrap it up there.
You mean a reduction in the employees?
The actual physical property, the actual employees, et cetera, yes.
Well, right now we're sitting with 1,750 employees, the lowest we've had in a century. But what we've been doing with the space is consolidating our members or our employees into certain areas of the building, and we've been renting out the rest. In fact, we rent out space to the architect of the Capitol, and we rent out space to Chief of Police, we rent out space to the International Commission on Religious Freedom and the Senate Sergeant at Arms. And later on this year, OFR is going to move into our building, which is great because we do a lot of work with Federal Register. And also NARA has asked for quite a bit of space for their archivists. We're going to archive their legislative documents.
Thank you, Director Vance-Cooks. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. The chair will now recognize Mr. Smith for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the agency heads here today. I appreciate your service, not only to those of us here on the panel or even all of Congress, but the American people. To Mr. Ayers, thank you for outlining in your testimony. I was wondering if you could perhaps elaborate on the maintenance needs and obviously deferred maintenance. We have some projects underway now, whether it's Canton Renewal or the Rayburn Parking Garage, that kind of separated themselves perhaps from some other deferred maintenance projects, and how you prioritize addressing these projects, especially as it relates to health and safety issues.
A great question, and we have a really mature project prioritization process in place that helps us distinguish and bubble up the most important priorities to the top of our capital improvement project list. And we will look at deferred maintenance and capital renewal, capital investment and capital construction. And our algorithm moves deferred maintenance to the top of that list. So the theory that you want to take care of what you have before you build new holds true in our project prioritization process. But not only that, we look at mission and economics and energy and environmental stewardship, historic preservation, regulatory compliance. All of that comes into this prioritization process, and we then will filter those projects out by whether we can do them, are we ready to execute them, how critical they are to the functioning of the Congress, and the like. And this has been in place for a number of years, and it's really been a fantastic tool both for us to be able to put forth to the Congress what we believe are the most important projects, but also for the Congress to use to validate a process that we've gone through to ensure they're making the right investments. Today, our deferred maintenance stands at, or backlog of deferred maintenance stands at $1.5 billion and continues to grow each year. Obviously, from a strategic perspective, we've got to continue to work to drive that down. Deferred maintenance should never be zero, nor should it be $1.5 billion.
Sure. Can you give us an update on the Rayburn parking and Cannon renewal? Are we on time and otherwise?
We are, both on the Rayburn parking garage, which we've recently kicked off. It is on time and on schedule, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with this committee, who's been really helpful in kicking off that first phase, the first of 4 phases in the Rayburn garage, and each of those will take a year and a year and a half. So this is a multi-year, more than $100 million investment in that building, and the ability to reach out to members and communicate what's going on has been really invaluable for us working with this committee. Similarly, on the Cannon renewal project, you know, we have another 8 years to go in that in the renewal of that building. We remain on budget, we remain on schedule, and looking forward to continuing to work with this committee to keep members informed of the progress of that work.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
The chair will now recognize Mr. Loudermilk for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank to all our panel for being here. And spending 30 years of my life in the IT sector, I have a lot of concerns, as many do, with cybersecurity and access to information. And in our jobs, that is a balance, providing access to public and transparent information, but at the same time protecting the information that should be protected. Unfortunately, the federal government has become notorious throughout the nation as being the most insecure of most of major organizations in this nation. Prior to coming to this committee, I served on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, which we conducted several investigations into cybersecurity breaches, and I remember asking the Inspector General after one, how would you rate the federal government's cybersecurity posture on an elementary school grading scale, and he said D-, which was a grave concern. So I know we do have a lot of work to do there. So most of my questions will be geared around that. I do have a lot of questions, and what I don't get to because of time, we'll submit for the official record, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman. But and I do know that many of you are making strides in that direction. And Dr. Hayden, thank you for coming by our office. I really enjoyed our chat, and really excited about you being on board. And I know that you're already taking steps in moving in the right direction, following a lot of the IG's initiatives or recommendations. I got a couple of questions, though, just for clarity, so I can understand. I understand the centralization that you're going through with the IT, and I commend that. I think that's very important. A lot of organizations get into trouble because they don't centralize. But in the memorandum that was sent out recently, you stated that top-level supervisors of staff conducting IT activities throughout all service units will report through the CIO. Those not currently reporting to the CIO will be placed on a detailed assignment to the CIO. My question is, what type of activities are those that you're realigning or restructuring to the CIO?
Centralization, especially in an organization like the Library of Congress that has several very mission-oriented areas: copyright,
right,
CRS, library services, National Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. Those mission-critical aspects will be protected and maintained with IT centralization. The centralization centers more on security and making sure that there is cross-departmental coordination of security, as well as procurement and coordination of general effort. There are opportunities for lapses in security when you have siloed IT departments that are not even working together. And so the Library of Congress and that memo that you referred to really, and this was a very pointed GAO recommendation, needed to centralize IT aspects of operation without physically, in some instances, removing the people from their actual, the CRS people are still located in CRS and copyright. They report through
So
the chief
functionally,
of-
they're working for, let's say, the
Functionally, they are
Copyright
definitely right,
Office,
and you
but
need that.
operationally, they report through the CIO, so.
Right, and also an important aspect, and this was another GAO recommendation, is a project management unit, so that if, for instance, CRS has a specialized IT need and they're contracting out for a project, that there is a centralized project management office that is overseeing all IT projects and just being quality control on that.
Okay, and I appreciate that, because working in this field, we worked at a lot of businesses that did not have centralization, and you had aspects, IT resources in other departments that weren't under the direction of the CIO, therefore it's hard to implement cybersecurity and updates and those things that are important. So, and I think I see your CIO nodding in agreement.
Yes,
This
Mr.
is a good
Barton,
move, and
yes.
I agree with that. And thank you so much.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to working with you. Chief.
Yes, sir.
Similar type questions, but I know that from my experience in working in the IT field, everything is risk management. You know, you can put the most secure network system in the world, but it's unusable, so you have this balance. What role that you can speak of does the Capitol Police play in our IT infrastructures, predominantly for the House of Representatives?
Well, in reference to the House, we are more of an enforcement when there's a violation. The House has a chief administrative officer who controls the IT areas and how they interact with each individual employing office. So we do partner on the legislative branch cross-committee in terms of sharing information, looking at ways to combine efforts in terms of security, training. Of course, we're always our worst enemy when it comes to our weakest links are our employees that are falling victim to phishing expeditions and those types of things. So I think that across the enterprise, the entire ledge branch, we have a very good working group. We don't control, we control our own and our own infrastructure, both classified and unclassified. And we work very closely with our Inspector General to close audit recommendations in terms of whether it's a system issue on our financial statements or whether it's an IT-specific enterprise.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I close with one quick question for the chief, just to bring closure to that? Or
Unless Mr. Brady objects, you may ask a question.
So, understanding you have an investigatory role there, does the Capitol Police have investigators that are forensic experts in the IT field for cybersecurity, or is that something that
We do.
would be needed? You do? Okay.
We do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank each of you for coming today. This is a special place, and I know everyone in here is an institutionalist and respects it and loves this, what we do. And the only thing I would say is, you know, we're all in this together. So we really we don't like surprises, do we, Chief? Nobody likes surprises.
Sir.
So if there's a problem or something is coming up, talk to us about it and give us that advance notice. But again, thank you to the members for being here. Without objection, this hearing will recess until tomorrow, where we will hear from our second panel of witnesses, and we will also have a markup.
Thank you.